The late former Zimbabwe President, Robert Mugabe, together with his former ZANU PF ministers, made statements to the effect that the Gukurahundi atrocities of the 1980s in Matabeleland and the Midlands, which claimed over 20,000 lives and left thousands displaced, was regrettable, and that it was a moment of madness which should never be allowed to happen again in Zimbabwe. In an interview with Dali Tambo on the 2nd of June 2013, Mugabe tried in vain to exonerate himself and laid the blame squarely on the army, whom he accused of operating in their individual capacity. However, the then ZANU PF party spokesperson, Nathan Shamyarira, maintained that it was necessary to deal with the dissident elements that way, while Edson Zobo claimed that it was a ZANU PF Central Committee resolution to deploy the army in Matabeleland and deal with his PF ZAPU dissidents. Therefore, the genocide was predetermined, intentional, and not just a moment of madness as perceived by Mugabe. At the height of the Matabeleland and the Midlands genocide, Joshua Nkomo went into exile, escaping through the Plumtree border posts into Botswana. His life was in danger as Mugabe wanted him dead or alive. Nkomo, who had previously been threatened with death, was left with virtually no room to maneuver as Mugabe was determined to establish a one-party state. Tubiso Davengwa, Lookout Masuku, who was later to die in detention, were arrested, and despite being acquitted, they remained in detention without charges. The trial central question remained unanswered. Who cashed the arms and why? Not a single individual, I think, possessed of an iota of common sense and compassion can fail to be deeply moved by the Gukurahundi atrocities which took place in Zimbabwe. The event left, like I said initially, that 20,000 people died, more than 20,000 people died, and many were displaced. The good thing is that most Zimbabweans agree that what happened during the early 80s was wrong and sad indeed. The issue of finding a lasting solution to the emotive Gukurahundi in Zimbabwe is currently being led by the chiefs. Just like the UDI system, the one that was used by Ian Smith and his Rhodesian government, Gukurahundism has interfered in chieftainship wrangles, imposing party loyalists ahead of the rightful heirs. The chief is an important figurehead in the Zimbabwean society, and by being partisan, democracy is compromised. A chief can disown a subject, and once disowned, a person finds himself without a home, and this has affected large numbers of opposition supporters. In the next video clip, you are listening to the Vice President of Zimbabwe, Constantino Chiwenga, addressing or rather dressing down chiefs. After one of the chiefs, Chief Murinye, to be more precise, had confronted the government to fight the plunder of mineral wealth, which was ongoing in his area of jurisdiction.
Kuna paramount chief isine fadani tiri kunzwa tese mazisho tiri kunzwa tese tiri tese here zviya zvinoitwa nevanenge vamamutoriro zviya. In this country it is never done. We have one Monomtapa, we have one leader. And it is that leader we give our respect. It is that leader. We show the entire nation what respect is all about. So what has been done by Chief Murinye is going to be investigated by the minister responsible for the local government and the president of the Chiefs Council and his deputy and the council. And he found guilty. Then the appropriate disciplinary actions will be taken. This is the Republic of Zimbabwe. Ashitwe, zvinhu zvakazungwera kudaro. Tiri tese madzimambo. Tiri tese. Ndakazvitwa sei? Ushe unopuwa, ushe unobviswa futi.
The Vice President is referring to President Mnangagwa as Munomtapa, the paramount chief. Not surprising at all. Elected leaders in the UDI system were a preserve of the whites, while blacks were in the jurisdiction of their traditional leaders, that is the chiefs. Chiefs are not elected. They are born and replaced at death, as alluded to before. Mugabe, being one of the first leaders to be elected by the majority, he was viewed by many Zimbabweans as the paramount chief who can only be, or who could only be replaced when he dies. Mugabe did not carry the title Munomtapa by the time of his death or by the end of his reign. The only other self-proclaimed Munomtapa III, or Munomtapa III, was Lawrence Warlord Chakareza, an activist who wanted Rhodes' remains exhumed from the Matopos, to which his successor Munomtapa IV, Emerson Mnangagwa, is committed to see it to its fruition. It is, however, the level of contempt which is worrisome, given that these are the same chiefs who are supposed to lead the emotive Gukurahundi issue. You can fool some people at times, but you can't fool all the people always. no one in his rightful mind can imagine that the chiefs who are part of Vice President Chiwenga's audience are the same chiefs who are supposed to bring about an independent, let alone a lasting solution to the Gukurahundi issue. With the Zimbabwe government insisting that it will not focus on the past, but the present and the future. Unfortunately, Gukurahundi tactics of murder, violence with impunity, persistently reminds us of the past. It should be noted that it is the killings of civilians in the streets of Harare in August 2018 and January 2019, which culminated in the establishment of the Mkonto Commission. It has become obvious that a lasting solution to an urgent matter like Gukurahundi is fast becoming a pipe dream. The urgency arises from the fact that the perpetrators and the victims alike are succumbing to old age and are dying at an alarming rate. However, South Africa has always been fingered in the Gukurahundi issue. A pertinent newspaper excerpt from the Newsday, a Zimbabwean daily, published on the 29th of May 2012, incriminated Mkonto Wesizwe and thereby dragging South Africa into the Gukurahundi issue. This information is also available on a number of search engine tools. The excerpt alludes to the fact that PF ZAPU has broken the silence on the arms caches which sparked the 1980 Gukurahundi and thereby incriminating Mkonto Wesizwe. As a Zimbabwean citizen who in 2010 authored and published a book, Gukurahundi Ideology, Why Zimbabwe is in Crisis. This is the book which I authored and was published in 2010. And I'm also a witness to the violence that was perpetrated with impunity. I am compelled to join the debate on Gukurahundi. I've also penned a letter to both President Mnangagwa and President Ramaphosa, to which I've also included in my other publication. That's the visitation, Lost 10 Commandments Unveiled, the True Zimbabwe Bad and Egyptian Horrors Image. I'm the author there. One of the pressing issues contained in the letter is the Gukurahundi issue, in which I propose that the Gukurahundi issue cannot be resolved without South Africa's participation. And let me read an excerpt of the letter. The Gukurahundi atrocities tops the Zimbabwean list of challenges. The Zimbabwe government in the early 80s had to deal with an insurgents after it had discovered arms caches at several PF ZAPU farms. PF ZAPU was later to confess that the arms found on their farms belonged to Mkonto Wesizwe, a claim which you, Mr. Ramaphosa, your government and party, the ANC, have not refuted. One can then argue that if the Mugabe regime had not found Mkonto Wesizwe's arms on PF ZAPU farms, the Zimbabwe government would have probably reacted differently, resulting in a different outcome. In that case, South Africa becomes an accomplice in the Gukurahundi menace. Therefore, the Gukurahundi issue cannot be resolved without the involvement of South Africa, close quote. However, since the said newspaper publication in 2012, the MK, African National Congress, ANC, and the South African government have remained mum. And thanks to the recently published book, the International Brigade Against Apartheid, Secrets of the People's War That Liberated South Africa, edited by Ronnie Castrels. On the 10th of December 2021, I was invited by Dr. G.N.M. Pando, the Minister for the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, to attend a panel discussion on the new book, this one, at the O.R. Tambo buildings in Pretoria.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good afternoon, everyone. You're all very subdued. Good afternoon. It's lovely to see you all here. Dr. Msimang, thank you for agreeing to be our Program Director for this webinar meeting. Then dear colleagues and members of the diplomatic corps, excellencies and ambassadors and high commissioners present here, former ambassadors, serving ambassadors, I see a few, distinguished guests from academia, panelists, contributors to this book, guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me on behalf of our government, our people, and my Department of International Relations and Cooperation to welcome you to this important hybrid event to discuss the book and the lessons edited by one of our own anti-apartheid stalwarts and former Minister, Comrade Ronnie Castrels. The book, The International Brigade Against Apartheid, Secrets of the People's War That Liberated South Africa, and we added South Africa's stance on multilateralism from our own purpose as international relations. The book for us represents a very important contribution to our understanding of the freedom struggle and the war that was waged against apartheid. The theme of the event is really drawn from the words of Ronnie Casseroles when he speaks of the universal cause of freedom, equality, and internationalism. And it is that set of objectives that drove our interest in having a meeting such as this one. I really am excited that we're going to have an opportunity to reflect on the meaning and contribution of this very important book. I think it's a valuable set of memoirs and recollections. I should have perhaps begun by saying that our comrade, former Minister Paulo Jordan, has sent through his apology that he's unable to join us. They had a number of technical challenges in Cape Town, and thus he couldn't connect as planned, connect with us virtually as planned. I should also say that we are hoping that in the segment of the program where there's the conversation between Mr. Mabuso Simama, Program Director, and the editor of the book, Comrade Ronnie Casseroles, that you will allow them to draw on you as well. So some of you will be invited and encouraged to be part of a multiple track of conversations and not just limited to the two who are here with me at the honey table. Well, for all of you, I'm sure, this book takes you through the memory lanes of South Africa's struggle against one of the most inhumane periods in the history of the human race. When I had occasion to speak to Comrade Ronnie Casseroles about the book, it was my feeling that the book then really still in almost complete draft form was a very important compilation of experiences and contributions to the international campaign against apartheid, and for me was a wonderful practical expression of the invaluable role international solidarity can play in creating a better world. When I was told of the book, I felt we can't miss having a meeting of this kind or virtual deliberation. The panel will discuss how the book relates to our foreign policy stance on multilateralism. We think it's always important to remind ourselves that the war that assisted in liberating this beautiful nation was strongly intensified and won through rule-based multilateralism, which is a framework that shapes South Africa's current foreign policy. The liberation struggle in South Africa would have been made even more difficult without the international campaigning efforts of leaders working in exile under the leadership of our great leader, O.R. Tambo. Comrade Ronnie Casseroles has recognized this book as an important reminder of our common humanity and an affirmation that we need such alliances to create a truly non-racial, non-sexist world and a truly non-racial, non-sexist South Africa. I think if more and more South Africans could have attention to the support that we were able to secure in the international domain in order to secure the freedom we enjoy today, South Africans would better understand the need for us to collaborate with the rest of the world in ensuring that everyone enjoys the freedom we prize so dearly. And for me, this book just gives an example of how such an international alliance can be built. I'm reminded as we reflect today of the words of Dr. John Henrik Clarke when he wrote that history is a clock that people use to tell their time of the day. It is a compass they use to find themselves on the map of human geography. And it tells them where they are and what they are. To look either at how they or those they work with, particularly younger people, how we can infuse a similar dynamism and activism in young people to get them to continue to pursue these struggles. Otherwise, they're going to disappear with us. I know that in this room, there aren't many who are below 40, like me. And the struggle can't remain with us. The tasks that remain unfinished cannot be ours alone. I think much more should be done to build younger blocks of solidarity internationally so that we can build robust international campaigns on the causes that are unfinished, and there are many.
This to me was music for the ears, but it was equally challenging, to say the least.
Let me conclude by repeating that we believe very strongly that international solidarity and multilateralism are key to world peace and stability. I think that voice that was so strong against apartheid needs to rear its vocal cords again and become strong in cause of the vulnerable and the marginalized. And one thing that I sensed as we go through the book is the amazing comradeship, the shared notion of striving for the freedom of others. I wish it could be a notion we could appropriate once more. It's my great pleasure then to declare this session and event open. Thank you very much.
In this collective effort, which I strongly recommend as a must-read for humankind who needs to be constantly aware of the power and morality of international solidarity in action. Greater words have been said by others, but with that, I would like us to have start having a conversation. Comrade Ronnie, over to you.
I'm actually not quite the age of Minister Naledi Pandor's wonderful father, Joe Matthews, but he in fact helped to bring me up in politics in Durban in 1960. And I always remind Naledi about this. You see, I'm BBC, born before computers, so I don't handle the technology very well. But if I may, Comrade Mavuso, and thank you for being here and for supporting the book, if I might just begin, before responding, to express on behalf of myself and all the contributors of this book, and their 62 contributors, I'll come back to defining them in a little while, if I may, Mavuso. But to express to you, Minister Pandor, on behalf of this collective, our deep felt appreciation for your interest in not just the book, but of course the international solidarity which brought about the worldwide anti-apartheid movement. Your father was part of that initiative. And those who have contributed to the book, both those who carried out the institutionalized mobilization of the world to isolate the apartheid regime at international level, starting with what we called in those days the Organization of African Unity, to the Tricontinental Solidarity Movement, the non-aligned, of course the United Nations and so on, which really also those like Martha Gordon here, originally from Canada, now a citizen in South Africa, and several of those like her who carried out clandestine work not the public work, but the actual highly dangerous clandestine work of assisting the African National Congress, and in particular the Mkonto Wesizwe wing of the liberation movement in terms of armed struggle operations in assisting MK to carry out its works. So, Minister Naledi, it's on behalf of this international brigade, the Ubuntu brigade, as I refer to them in the book, and you've spelled out the meaning of Ubuntu, which is a person is a person because of other people. It's a universal morality of sisterhood, of brotherhood, of comradeship, of all of us in this world which we are striving to ensure its health, its life.
Privileged to be with you this afternoon. The first time I spoke about my role, very small role, in the support for the anti-apartheid movement was on Wednesday at our online book launch. So please forgive me if I'm a bit nervous. It's only the second time now speaking in public about it. But really, if I can just share, it all started when I was a university student in Canada and got involved in the anti-apartheid student movement, where we were campaigning for disinvestment, boycotting South African products, supporting the calls for the release of political prisoners, economic sanctions, and so on. And at that time in the 1980s, you'll remember, it was a really difficult time, not only in Southern Africa, but in the world. And there were the 2 states of emergency, so it was very difficult for accurate news to come into Canada to really show what was happening in the country. So part of the work of the anti-apartheid movement, led by the ANC, was to really spread correct information about what was going on. So that was part of our role as well, and to show solidarity in various campaigns. And it was in that process that, at the age of 22, it was an honor that I was called and asked to assist in the frontline states and asked to move there and to work for the ANC. So I make the point that I was called, I was asked. It was an honor and a privilege to take up that calling and to come, not knowing exactly what I was going to be doing, but knowing that I would be supporting the underground work in dangerous and risky work, but knowing the integrity of the leadership, I was willing to take that chance. So it was only now, with the work of the book, that I realized the extent of internationals doing this similar work that I was doing. And part of why some of us, well, I can only speak for myself, to share our story, because we never thought we would ever share our story or tell anybody, and we never wanted recognition. So we thought we would go to our grave, so to speak, with this secret life that we lived. Only immediate family and close friends knew many years after democracy. So the reason why we wanted to share was really to inspire others that there's so much we need to do in this world. We need to show solidarity for so many causes, but also to inspire one another with the stories that we have. That our stories, there are millions and millions of stories around the world. Everyone has a story to share. But we thought it's important, and thanks to Ronnie and his team in leading this amazing project, that we preserve some of this history and that commitment and passion to the liberation of the country. But not only that, it wasn't just about fighting apartheid and seeing its demise, which was what motivated us. We were so passionate about the injustice and the horror of what millions of people have been facing for centuries, not just only decades, that we wanted to do something more. But being asked to go this special step was something we felt was really important to do. I'm not sure to explain some of the detail, really, that I was working as a teacher in Zimbabwe, and that was sort of my real life. And then I had a second life, which was bringing arms into the country, and we used to bury them and return to Zimbabwe with the map memorized, and comrades would then have access to those weapons to use for defending communities, defending all kinds of situations. So it was really a time to support the efforts for a peaceful transition. I think also in 1990, December 1990, I was asked to move from Zimbabwe to be based in Johannesburg. So at that point, I needed to find a safe house, to find a job, and to continue a double life. But at that time, you will recall, it was a really dangerous situation. Former President and icon Nelson Mandela had been released, and the war that was taking place in the country was extremely terrifying and upsetting, with so many lives lost on a daily basis in the trains, in the communities, and we needed to defend the people. So that's why I was based in Johannesburg, and then from there we didn't have digging of holes anymore, thank goodness, but we then had to swap vehicles and use vehicles to move weapons around the country where they were needed. So this continued, and I would say that those years, 91 and 92, were the most.
One crucial secret revealed, even as late as 1990, years after the Gukurahundi, MK was still smuggling arms into Zimbabwe and hiding them for future use, for cross-border raids by the MK. It is this revelation that piqued my mind. After listening to the panelists, I was left with a lot of unanswered questions. Towards the end, I then approached Mr. Mavuso Msimang, who was the program director, and I showed him the newspaper excerpt from the Newsday, the 2012 excerpt, and I asked him to either confirm or deny the report. He said to me that, look, currently Zimbabwe and South Africa enjoy, cordial relations, and it would be inappropriate for him to respond. I then asked him if probably General Simpiwe Nyanda could respond. Again, he reminded me that General Nyanda was a serving ambassador, and it won't be proper for him to dwell on those matters. It was at that moment that I reminded Mr. Msimang that people had died, and gladly he then asked me how best I thought he could handle the matter. Then I proposed that he should allow me to ask the question in case any one of the panelists will be in a position to respond, to which he agreed. And I was given the microphone, and I read the excerpt of the newspaper, and asked members of the panelists if anyone could confirm the newspaper report. And without any hesitation, Mr. Ronnie Castro responded on the question of the arms caches.
Not forget the role of ZAPU and ZEPRA, which goes well before that time to the 1967 and 68 Huanqui and Sipulelo incursions, in which Joe Modise and Dumisa Debengwa, the great patriot and internationalists of ZAPU and ZEPRA, and might I say that the gentleman to my right here, Mavuso Simon, was actually part of that whole project. He played a very important role. In the book, there are two outstanding contributions, one from Fidelis Hove, whose mother happened to be ZAPU and his father happened to be ZANU, incidentally. He's a young person, and incidentally he would have been here today, but he's at an MK event in Johannesburg with Jackie Sidibe, General Sidibe, and that's the widow of Joe Modise. They were going to be here, and I said to them, please officiate at the MK event at the Military Museum in Joburg. That particular period in the 60s, which gave tremendous international support from Zimbabweans to MK, we went through a period leading to this reference of arms caches within Zimbabwe. But it goes much beyond that. This was actually the work of Dumisa Debengwa, people in ZEPRA like Jeremy Brickill at that time and others, who continued throughout the 80s, right through to 1990, to continue to support MK people within Zimbabwe. And you heard from Arthur Gordon how she was based there, bringing weapons through to South Africa from Zimbabwe. But I can restate that yes, ZAPU and the ZEPRA comrades particularly continued to house and support MK people within Zimbabwe right through the end. And the book gives testimony to that. So it's a marvelous example of solidarity from Zimbabwe.
Xenophobia?
I'm going to say in finale that what it reminds us of is the solidarity from our African sisters and brothers and governments across the borders, and how in the period of our need there was no element of xenophobia. We never encountered complaints in any of these countries, from Tanzania to Zambia to Zimbabwe, Botswana, Swaziland, Lesotho, from people there. These South Africans are creating problems for us. They gave us their sisterly and brotherly and comradeship through and through. This is why we in South Africa promise, and to Durko, who's doing fine things, we have to fight this evil of xenophobia and remind our people of the common cause, and not to be diverted by those who wish to divide us in these xenophobic statements.
On Dumisa Debengwa.
So I want to thank you very much for bringing this point to us, and I want to say this formally, and I'll speak to the Minister about this. Dumisa Debengwa has been overlooked in South Africa's national honours. He should have long ago received the Companion of O.R. Tambo, because he gave so much over so many decades in terms of support to South Africa. And I want to say this to Durko: there are young people, maybe a bit older in Zimbabwe, of of the liberation movement who have said to me, because MK and the ANC are wanting to give awards to internationalists, and they have said to me, Comrade Ronnie, please tell the ANC leadership, we will not take any award as individuals until Dumisa Debengwa has been honoured. And this is something with Mavuso, we're discussing this with Snooki Zikalala, who leads the veterans of MK and ANC, that we are determined to take this issue up, as we must take up the issue of people who served us, who work in our country from abroad, who assisted us in the way you heard from Martha Gordon, who have problems here today in receiving permanent residence in our country. And every time they need to go back to their home countries in Europe or abroad, they have tremendous difficulties because they don't and have not received the correct documentation which they should receive. And this is the kind of solidarity which we must return to them to make it as comfortable as you are, Martha, in this country, having applied and succeeded in getting citizenship. So I want to end on that note of the reciprocity of solidarity. Thank you.
Ronnie's submission and revelation that indeed the arms caches were Mkonto Wesizwe is also buttressed in the book, The International Brigade Against Apartheid. Reading chapter 4, Jeremy Brickhill, The Secret History of Zimbabwe Support for Mkonto Wesizwe. This is quite profound and revealing. I also had questions for the other members of the International Brigade Against Apartheid. For Lord Peter Hain, I wanted to ask why the British refused Joshua Nkomo asylum when they were aware that there was a genocide ongoing in Zimbabwe. Were there any trade-offs between Zimbabwe and the UK which benefited South Africa while costing Zimbabwe thousands of lives? Or during the struggle for the liberation of South Africa from the apartheid regime, was there a deliberate British policy to ignore other political events which were unfolding in the southern part of Africa, especially acts which had a potential of derailing the liberation struggle for South Africa, as could be witnessed when the British did cast a blind eye on Gukurahundi atrocities in Zimbabwe at the time? The issue of intangible heritage, which has in recent years received recognition from UNESCO, is one crucial issue that needs to be addressed, especially with regards to closure. It is the living who need closure, but it is also the dead. Their spirits are wandering, trying to find closure. Will the lives of Zimbabweans and other Africans who sacrificed or who paid the ultimate price remain wandering without the African governments taking the necessary steps to make sure that we perform the correct and the right rituals in order for these spirits to find closure and to rest in peace. So there is need to establish an international brigade against Gukurahundi, as previously alluded by Minister Pando, that these international collaborations, should not end, but should be seen to be tackling other pressing issues. And Gukurahundi, as a pressing matter, requires that South Africa and other international players be actively involved in trying to find a lasting solution to the Gukurahundi issue.